And a very warm welcome to all the law enthusiasts and aspiring law students for this exciting masterclass. We are delighted to welcome Professor Vikas Muralidharan, speaker for today, also lecturer at the School of Law, Sai University. A distinguished legal academic practitioner, Vikas brings over years of experience across legal research, teaching, and high-profile dispute resolution as well. An LLM graduate, he was awarded the University Gold Medal and the Dean's Award for All-Round Performance. His work includes notable publications in international and constitutional law, including contributions to Lexology's International Mediation Guide. He began his legal journey under the mentorship of senior advocate Sriram Panchu, contributing to landmark mediations like the Ayodhya dispute. And a very warm welcome, sir, and over to you.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. And hi, welcome to everyone who's joined today's webinar. Good evening. Thank you all for joining today. Today, the title of the webinar is pretty self-explanatory. Can you go to jail for a meme? And what I've tried to do is I've tried to explore maybe an intersection of what is freedom of speech, what it looks like when it comes to regulating speech and expression on the internet, and what the emerging landscape is like for digital regulation in India. But before I go on to, how many attendees do we have? I'm sorry. Can someone tell me what the phrase freedom of speech means in your understanding?
Participants, if you have anything to say, you can raise your hand or you can post in the chat box or Q&A.
No one? Nobody say that. Okay.
Nitish, you have anything to say?
Yes, Nitish. You can just unmute and speak. While we wait for that, these are some concrete examples of people being arrested for memes, so for cartoons. So this is not an abstract question that we're dealing with. These are things that have happened. In 2019, a woman named Priyanka Sharma was arrested for making a meme on the chief minister. Then there was also the cartoonist Asim Trivedi, whose cartoon was deemed to be insulting national symbols. And there have been cases of offensive WhatsApp forwards, and these refer to certain memes in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, which have gotten people booked for violating the law. So can you be arrested for a meme? These events, I don't think these are not isolated events, right? And you would see this in the news a lot more often nowadays, where people who of people being arrested for making posts online or sharing a meme or making some sort of satirical article. Recently, there is a website that's been banned. The concept of the website was basically the Onion and an Indian version of the Onion. And they were publishing satirical news pieces that were critical of the government. So these kinds of humorous expression online can and has been landing people in trouble. So what we'll try to do today is try to explore what freedom of speech means as per the Indian Constitution. We'll try to explore whether it is unlimited, whether it has certain limitations, and we'll try to understand what the limitations are. So what is free speech in India? Freedom of speech is a constitutionally guaranteed fundamental right. That means it's a basic right that every Indian citizen has. And the phrase used is freedom of speech and expression. Um, but why is freedom of speech and expression important? Can someone tell me that? Why? What is so great about free speech? What makes it important?
Yes,
Yeah, sir.
Purushottam, you can. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is not an absolute right. And
Yeah,
every now and then there are some petition related to freedom of speech and expression. So that's why it's controversial.
yeah, yeah. Yes, it is controversial, but why do countries all over the world, or why is freedom of speech looked at as a very important right? Why is it so controversial? Why is it so important to people that they have the freedom to speak?
It is because unless or until we criticize government or we oppose some certain implementation of the government,
Mm.
uh, there is no democracy. Means that is not that is not the foundation of a democracy. That is kind of autocracy or something like. So that's why it's important in democracy to have freedom of speech and expression and express our opinion about whatever it may be.
Yes, that's a great answer. So let's try and analyze that a bit. Freedom of speech is important because only when we have the power to criticize the government are we truly living in democracy? Does that mean when we say freedom of speech, the only kinds of speech that are protected are speeches that provide or have certain social value, um, or what can be called quote unquote useless chatter? Is that not protected under free speech rights? Harmless, useless chatter. Um, can that land a person in trouble? Okay. So what is the limit of free speech is different across jurisdictions. For example, uh, if you look at the US and India, US also has the free right to free speech in their constitution. India also has free speech in our constitution. But the interesting thing is the levels to which speech is allowed. If you look at the free speech article in US, and if you look at the levels to which their courts have given leeway for expression, it might be shocking to hear about if you're sitting in India and looking at and used to living in an environment that we have culturally grown up with. And that's fair because different countries have different cultures, and therefore the levels to which they regulate speech will be different. Uh, Freedom of speech absolutely is not uh, a total or complete right. It's not an absolute right. So totally right on that. There are different levels of restrictions. Um, but what are the restrictions that we have in India? Um, they are given in Article 19, Clause 2 of the Constitution. And Article 19, Clause 2 basically says that the freedom of speech can be subjected to reasonable restrictions, provided that the reasonable restrictions are on any of these grounds. If the speech is affecting the sovereignty and integrity of India, if the speech is affecting the security of the state, if the free speech is affecting friendly relations with foreign states, if it's a threat to public order, decency, or morality, if it is contempt of court, if it is defamation, or if it is an incitement to an offense. And these are fairly straightforward and easy to understand. If you look at the first two ones, freedom of speech and expression does not mean someone can publish military secrets, right? No one can say, I have access to this information and I have freedom of speech and expression, so I'm going to publish these military state secrets. Um, So that kind of speech obviously can be restricted, and the Constitution allows for it. Uh, there is also incitement to an offense, that is basically speech that encourages or incites someone to commit a crime, um, asking people to commit murder or asking people to commit some other kind of crime. Um, that kind of speech can be restricted. Defamation is an obvious one. Contempt of court is when you publish material that scandalizes the court or lowers its reputation. And you can also censor speech and expression on grounds of decency and morality. Uh, so now these are the various grounds on which speech can be expressed, speech can be restricted. Um, what are the various laws restricting speech? These are some laws in the IPC. This is obviously the older law. Should have been the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita now. But the sections are the same. The first one section that is commonly used was 153A of the IPC, and that is promoting enmity between two different groups. 295A of the IPC criminalizes speech that insults religious beliefs. It is kind of a blasphemy law. It is India's version of a blasphemy law. Section 499 and 500 criminalize defamation. And you have section 505 as well, which is statements conducing to public mischief. Now, these are certain sections in the Indian Penal Code that are used. Since we are talking about memes, which is mostly digital expression, there is also another act that applies. This is the Information Technology Act of 2000. There are three major sections, Section 66A, Section 67, and Section 69. Section 67 prohibits obscene content. Section 69 gives powers to the government to block certain websites on certain limited grounds. And there is this interesting section called Section 66A. Now, Section 66A is in the news a lot, or has been in the news a lot for a while. The Supreme Court said years ago that Section 66A violates the Constitution, violates the freedom of speech article in the Constitution. But shockingly, sometimes cases are still being filed under that section. And the Supreme Court has intervened again right now. But we will look at that case in detail in a bit. Shreya Singhal versus Union of India is the case that I was just talking about. Now, what was Section 66A of the IT Act? Was basically, it was an act that criminalized annoying or offensive messages that were posted on social media. Now, or that were posted to the internet, right? What happened was this section started being used to arrest people. I'm sorry, I see someone with their hand up. Yes. Ashik, you have your hand raised. You can ask a question, or what is that for?
Ashik, if you have anything to say, you can.
Okay, we'll have a section for, we'll have some time for question and answers there anyway, so we can jump to this at that. Now, Section 66A was a section of the Information Technology Act that criminalized offensive or annoying messages. Now, what happened was that the police in various states started using it to arrest people for social media posts, for memes, for any other kind of humor that was posted on the internet that they felt uncomfortable by. A classic example what happened in Mumbai. This is the basis for which this case came up. Where a very senior political figure had passed away, and there was a bandh that was organized in the entirety of Mumbai. And there was this woman who posted a social media post expressing frustration at the situation and why annoyed that why is there a bandh? Why should we have a bandh for this reason and all of that? And two others had liked that social media post. Now, all three of them had cases filed against them, were arrested for violating Section 66A of the Information Technology Act, which criminalized offensive or annoying speech. Now, does that seem like it is a fair law? Do you think this law is okay? Do you think the law was applied in a correct manner? Yes, Nitish?
మంచిగా సిల్వర్
Okay, I don't know what's happening.
Nitish, if you have something to say?
All right. So I feel like it's, and this is my personal opinion, I feel like that the intent behind the section to criminalize offensive or annoying messages was to criminalize spam, right? This is something that's been written about. These repeated telemarketing calls or messages that someone might get. Maybe that was the intention behind the section, but the words that were used, annoying and offensive, if you look at that, these words are very vague words. And the way it was applied in the country was to make arrests on the basis of what people were offended by. If they found a certain message annoying or offensive, they could have an FIR filed on you under Section 66A of the Information Technology Act. So in this case, that law was challenged. Every law that's made in the country has to follow the Constitution, has to be as per the Constitution. So the law was challenged, and the claim made was that the law violated the constitutional guarantee of freedom of speech. The Supreme Court held that yes, Section 66A did violate freedom of speech because the words that were used were so vague. And the words annoying and offensive, the words that were used were so vague that inherently the law had a problem where people could be arrested for innocent expressions, for making jokes, for making statements that others were offended or annoyed by. And this really paved the way for protection of speech on the internet in terms of freedom of speech and expression. The next thing that you will have to worry about if you are someone who is making memes is that are you at the risk of a defamation case? Now, defamation, online defamation is a real thing. The definition law imposes criminal liability on anything that tarnishes the reputation of an individual. Now, every individual has a right to reputation. And when you damage that person's reputation or lower their standing in the public eye, the defamation law kicks in. Now, criminal liability is possible. It's also civil wrong, which means you can also be sued for compensation. Um, sorry, why is this? There are also laws relating to cyberbullying and harassment. Now, there is no specific anti-bullying law in India, but a section of the Criminal Law and the Information Technology Act is used. There are provisions in the criminal law for from stalking, from identity theft, from abuse online. Um, there have been various cases reported in the recent past, within the past 3-4 months, of online meme pages or Telegram channels being shut down for this reason. And basically, misuse of a photograph or just uh, cyberbullying, use of abusive and profane language, threatening language online, and targeted harassment. All of these can attract criminal action. The nature of a meme is that a meme is satire, a meme is parody. It's intended to be humorous, it's intended to poke fun at something, but it is important for you to have a certain balance when you are exercising your freedom of speech and expression, where you do not cross the line of criminality. Um, Satire and parody is definitely protected by the courts. The former Chief Justice of India, uh, Chandrachud, had a judgment where he had written about the importance of satire and humor and parody. So, pages or posts that satirize or that post parodies are not really in danger of violating laws, um, provided that the context is uh, clear otherwise, right? Um, so, as with any other type of speech, humor, parody, critique, they're all protected speech. Um, but the context in which you share them, the impact of the speech, the intent, and the way you in which you share or you express is really important. So this is another popular case. Uh, Asim Trivedi was a cartoonist. He drew certain cartoons of certain national symbols, including the Parliament building, and these cartoons were deemed offensive and charges were filed under what was then Section 124A of the Indian Penal Code, which is sedition. Um, the case was dropped. It did not lead to a conviction, but there was a national debate as to um, what is the limit of free speech or what is the extent of free speech when it comes to humor, when it comes to parody or critique. Um, In the beginning of this webinar, I had asked a question to one of the students who had answered. What about useless chatter? Uh, the US has a very high threshold for freedom of speech. Um, there are various types of speech that are permitted by US courts, which would probably be would lead to arrests and imprisonment in India. So balancing your freedom of expression with the context and the situation in which you are placed is important. Um, there are types of speeches that are allowed in the US which would be deemed highly offensive and highly criminal in India. Uh, but while expressing and while creating content, it is important that we are able to balance a line between social responsibility and our free speech. Um, So if you're making memes and you don't want to end up in trouble, what do you do? First, avoid hate speech. Don't attack someone on the basis of protected categories. If you don't know what protected categories are, they are there in Article 15 of the Constitution. Examples of protected categories that are on the slide are religious or caste identities, but it can be anything: language, place of origin, um, race, gender, sex, sexual identity. So these are all protected categories. So avoid hate speech. Mm. Using disclaimers for parody or satire is a step that is often advised, but your content also has to match that. Also be mindful of public figures' rights. Public figures are not free game. So can you really go to jail for a meme? Um, if it crosses certain legal limits, if it in certain contexts, yes. In India, the threshold or um, freedom of speech can only be restricted on very, very specific narrow grounds. And we saw those grounds earlier, right? So as long as you are staying within that zone, no, sorry, staying out of that zone, as long as you're not crossing what is constitutionally provided to you, you are safe. And yes, that includes satire, it includes humor, it includes parodies, it also includes fair comments. Not everything that you say is defamation, right? Truth in public interest is a defense to defamation. Um, so all of these are constitutionally protected rights. Your right to make humor, your right to satirize, your right to parody. These are constitutionally protected rights. Um, but ensure that certain lines are not crossed. Uh, there is some time for question and answers. Um, if there are any questions on the extent of freedom of speech or anything else that we have discussed or something in your mind, we can discuss that.
Participants, if you have any questions, you can put in chat box or raise your hand. I think we can proceed, Professor. Probably at the end we can.
No, we're done, we're done.
Oh, participants, if you have any questions regarding the topic or about the program, for aspiring students, if you have doubts on any program related, university, anything, you can ask, sir. Someone writing, raise your hand. I think
There are a lot of examples that you can think of from the news in recent times as well, where digital expression has landed people in trouble. And I'm not just talking about serious pieces of journalism or something like that. And that's a whole different area of free speech. But for memes, for satire, for parodies, you can think of a lot of instances over the past 2 decades actually, which has landed people in trouble. It's never been looked at too kindly. Um, uh, but to be aware of our rights, I think, is the first step, and also to be aware of the limitations of those rights. Um, I remember when I was a college student, a page called Bombay High Court on Facebook, which just used to post satirical judgments. It was a fake page. It was just called Bombay High Court, but it was run by some random 3 to 4 trolls. And they would just make pop culture jokes or something in the format of a High Court judgment. Um, and I think they had a case filed against them, and they had to change the name of the page. They had to add an unofficial Bombay High Court, and then the page got taken down eventually. Um, a lot of these examples that have kept happening. But the answer to the question that I asked in the beginning, is to freedom of speech. It was a great answer that I received, that it's for critiquing the government and all of that. But freedom of speech is not just important for that. Um, I think to express thoughts, emotions, feelings is a core human value. It's just impossible for a human being to exist without that. Um, and the freedom to express that is something critical to human life, to the core of human life. That's how I feel. That if you want to have a full human experience, it is critical that you have the ability to express um, what you're thinking, how you're feeling, etc. Um, and it is only these conversations that when they can be had freely, it's only then that society can progress at a large. You know, it's only when different perspectives come out. It's only when uh, people who have different perspectives have the ability to speak and express freely, do other people get to learn. So to a certain extent, the right to freedom of speech is uh, also linked to the freedom to receive information, right? And that is something that the Supreme Court has held, that your right to information flows from the freedom of speech and expression that is provided under the Constitution. Um, so freedom of speech is a very core human value. I think that when we are discussing freedom of speech, it is important to acknowledge that yes, certain things may be shocking, certain things may be offensive, or certain things may be disturbing. Uh, but to express someone's thoughts or feelings, as long as they don't cross a line, as long as it's not hate speech, or as long as it's not speech encouraging crime or criminal activity, or it's not, blatantly spreading lies about someone to defame them. As long as it doesn't cross certain, or, state secrets, military secrets, etc. As long as it doesn't cross certain lines, I think it is important that as a society we value free speech, even if that speech is something that we personally find offensive. Um, and the other question that could have been asked is, does freedom of speech include the freedom to offend? Um, Now, obviously, offensive speech we can all try to avoid. But if you look at what Article 19, Clause 2 says, when you restrict free speech, um, causing offense is not one of the restrictions. It's not one of the grounds on which speech can be restricted as per Article 19, Clause 2. Different people may be shocked or offended or annoyed at different things. And that can't be a set standard for determining the right to freely express. Um, so there are all of these things to keep in mind. Uh, so in a society where humor by and large is being criminalized, I think all of us need to be aware of the extent of our freedom, but also the restrictions that we are not supposed to cross. Any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Participants, final call for questions. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat box. Meanwhile, thank you so much, Professor, for this interesting session. It was wonderful